Pat is one of my favorite people on YouTube. I absolutely love him, and I actually really do admire him for what he's doing. I mean, coming from the United States originally, before I moved here to England, Pat sort of incorporates what I thought was better in many ways about Britain, British English culture over America. The fact that people have opinions like his all the time. I mean, people can actually state it. He's on YouTube. There are actually people say it in the news media, in public. It's held. It's a legitimate public idea. I grew up in a place in America where it got out that I was an atheist in high school, and I actually had to deny my atheism. You know, it's funny, Christians talking about early Christians being forced to renounce their faith. Well, in much of America, probably in most of it, young atheists are forced to renounce their own atheism for their own personal safety or their own position within culture or just from cultural pressure. I at one time renounced my renunciation of God one specific time. I remember that. And I agree. I'm an atheist and I don't want to have any religious beliefs forced on me. I don't want to have any religious cultural traditions embodied as absolute traditions. But on the other hand, I find his radicalism a bit off-putting. To an extent, he sounds like a preacher of atheism. And I don't think that religion's problem is the beliefs as much as the preachers. It's a process of authoritarian imposition of certainty, um, which even if he denies it, certainly does ring through his voice. I never hear any doubts in him. I never hear any even openness to other points of view. And another extent is a religion and a mythological structure is sort of like a language. Um, if we lose a language, I mean, there's a modernist perspective that is like, shouldn't we all be speaking one or two languages? I mean, maybe the world would be better if everybody spoke English, Spanish, and Chinese, and then every person could probably talk to every other person. Then we would lose so much of the knowledge that we've accumulated, and there's more and more of a growing understanding that the loss of languages, loss of cultural traditions, is as impoverishing to us as human beings as a loss of biodiversity is to our ecosystem. And I would really be very, very concerned about a future where suddenly there was nobody practicing any of these religious traditions, that all we had were the texts. So that if we weren't interested in what the Judeo tradition was, we simply had Torah, or there was no people studying Torah. You might go to a university department and there would be archaeologists or anthropologists studying Torah, but that line of traditional knowledge would be lost. Um, and you say that for all the religions. I mean, particularly in my sense, the Buddhist tradition, I would be concerned about that. I would be very concerned that we as a civilization would lose the understanding and continuity of systems of values that vastly not only predate our scientific, our capitalist, our democratic worldview, but predate our languages, predate us by hundreds of generations, and that only through a living practice of religion do some of these value systems get preserved, some of these mythological systems, and that these systems, whether they please or flatter our current ideal of what a human being should know scientifically, still tell the story of the human species as a cultural being, as a cultural entity. And so personally, my take is, dude, I enjoy your fun, keep it up. You are a clear testament to the great democratic spirit within the United Kingdom around this issue, religion. I also am an atheist, but I fear the loss of long-term perspectives and long-term knowledges. And I think, you know what, maybe we could, this may sound patronizing, but maybe you should open yourself up to the ideal of a future religion as a kind of game preserve. We could maybe have 10% of the population living who study the Torah, who read their Bibles, who follow traditional practices, who learn their religions, who learn these ancient languages like Hebrew and Arabic and such, and through the stories and mythologies, through the practice of the religions, preserve cultural traditions that go back much, much, much longer than what produces our modernist society. What I will say, though, what I have no tolerance for are and you see this a lot in America, are the two guys who pick up a Bible, a translated Bible, read a few sections, highlight it, and invent a new form of Christianity tomorrow. I would be disturbed about how many people in the United States actually attend Christian churches, the theological structures of which were generated after the scientific revolution. I mean, there are, basically this entire obsession with destruction and extinction and end times probably isn't even as old in its current form as radio or television. And that type of religion would like to see wiped off the face of this earth. I think we should really look at a lot of these religious groups that are tending to follow ancient traditions. The radicals in the Islamic movement, well, it turns out they're a fairly recent reaction to colonialism and imperialism. I mean, you wouldn't have seen anything like this in Islam 200 years ago. These born-again evangelical Christians, well, these people are a response, an American response. They couldn't even have existed before radio because this type of practice of the evangelist whose own personality puts an interpretation with tens of thousands of followers sending them money. It just wouldn't have happened in a more traditional religious setup. So, you know, there's I think probably something to be said though for keeping a living religious tradition alive here for us as human beings, for us to see where we came from, what we believe. And I think Pat maybe would benefit from, even though I'm totally an atheist myself, and I pretty much agree with almost everything he says, might agree with a bit more tolerantness to a few people who, maybe aren't as good at science as he is. But keep it up, Pat. I think you're in a critical voice. And I would strongly suggest, do not go visit the United States. Your life would be in serious danger.